Emily tightened the collar of her worn jacket as she stepped outside into the crisp, biting air of a December morning. The sky was a pale, washed-out grey, and the chill wrapped around the streets like an invisible fog. Her breath came out in tiny clouds as she hurried down the sidewalk, her boots crunching softly on the thin layer of frost that coated the pavement. It was just another cold morning, nothing unusual about it. The neighborhood was still mostly asleep, houses with curtains drawn, cars parked and covered with a light dusting of ice. The wind pushed small scraps of paper and leaves along the curb, making the empty street feel even lonelier. Emily had somewhere to be. School was waiting with its usual headaches and homework, but she felt strangely disconnected from the routine. Her thoughts drifted, lost somewhere between the past weekend's forgotten conversations and the stack of unread messages on her phone. As she walked, her mind was elsewhere, focused on the rhythm of her steps and the cold that seemed to seep through every layer of clothing. She had grown used to this quiet solitude. Some days she preferred the silence that surrounded her to the noise inside classrooms or at home. Emily wasn't one to draw attention. She kept to herself, blending into the background like a shadow. But then, just as she passed the old bakery, a boarded-up building that had been closed for years, something caught her eye. Out of the corner of the street, where the light struggled to reach the cracked pavement, a small movement stirred. At first, Emily thought it might be a plastic bag fluttering in the wind, but as she looked closer, she saw a shape huddled near a trash bin. It was a dog, small, dirty, and trembling violently. The sight stopped her in her tracks. The dog's fur was tangled and soaked, sticking close to its thin body. Its ribs showed through the patchy coat, and its eyes were wide, glassy, and filled with a desperate sort of fear that made Emily's chest tighten. It looked as if it hadn't eaten in days, and the freezing temperature only seemed to make its trembling worse. Emily's heartbeat quickened as she instinctively took a small step back. The dog noticed her movement, its body stiffening, ready to bolt. But instead of running away, the dog took a hesitant step forward, as if it was searching for something or someone to trust. For a moment, Emily thought about just continuing her walk. She was late for school after all, and what could she possibly do? She wasn't an animal person, never had been. She didn't know anything about dogs, and the last thing she wanted was trouble or responsibility, but something about the dog's fragile state, the way it looked up at her with pleading eyes, made her pause. The dog's entire body shook uncontrollably, and it let out a soft, barely audible whimper. The street was quiet except for the occasional distant hum of a car or the soft whistle of the wind. Emily looked around to see if anyone else was nearby, but the sidewalks were empty, and the streetlights cast long, lonely shadows. For a few seconds, the girl and the dog simply stared at each other. Two strangers caught in a moment that felt much bigger than either of them. Emily's heart softened. She hadn't planned on this. She wasn't the kind of person who stopped for animals in the street. But now that she was here, she couldn't just walk away. She lowered herself slowly to the ground, careful not to scare the dog. Her gloved hand trembled as she reached out. The dog flinched but didn't back away, instead hesitantly sniffing, the air near her fingers. The cold seemed to fade a little in that quiet space between them. For Emily, the moment was surprising, a flicker of connection in her otherwise solitary life. Still, uncertainty lingered. Was it safe? Was this dog sick? Did it have an owner who was looking for it? Questions filled her mind, but for now all she could do was sit there in the cold morning air and watch the trembling dog, hoping she could somehow help. The dog's trembling didn't stop as Emily stayed crouched on the icy sidewalk. It lowered, its head slightly, and took another cautious step toward her, wincing with each movement. Emily noticed a limp in its right front paw, a slight but painful hobble that made her heart ache. The dog's matted fur was streaked with dirt and grime, and patches of skin peeked through the tangled coat. Despite its obvious pain, the animal showed no aggression. Instead, it looked up at Emily with a mixture of hope and fear that made her feel both helpless and responsible. Emily's mind raced. She had never seen an animal in such a state before. She thought of the warm bed waiting for her at home, the breakfast she hadn't yet eaten, and the school day she was supposed to face. But none of those things mattered anymore. This dog was here right now in need. People had passed by just moments before, their eyes glued to their phones or hurriedly stepping over puddles. No one had stopped. But Emily felt something inside shift, a quiet, urgent voice telling her this moment was different. She pulled off one glove, her fingers numb from the cold. Slowly she reached out again, this time closer to the dog's head. The dog flinched but didn't retreat. It sniffed her hand, then nudged it with a soft, wet nose. Emily's breath caught. The dog's warmth seeped into her chilled fingers. For a brief second, it was as if the cold world around them melted away, replaced by a fragile connection. She whispered softly, "Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." Her voice was gentle, steady, a calm island in the winter. Morning, the dog's ears twitched. It took a few more steps forward, placing its injured paw awkwardly. Emily noticed a faint, unpleasant smell, a mix of wet earth, something sour, and neglect. But she pushed the thought aside. Her eyes scanned the dog for any signs of a collar or identification. There was a faded, torn strip of material around its neck, but no tag. It was hard to tell if it had ever belonged to someone who cared. Emily's heart sank with the realization that this dog might have been wandering for days, maybe weeks, alone and cold, searching for a safe place. Her own problems, the stress of exams, the uncertainty about college, the awkwardness of fitting in, suddenly seemed trivial. This tiny creature was fighting for survival in a world that had forgotten it. The dog let out a soft whimper, and Emily's resolve strengthened. She carefully extended her free hand again, letting the dog sniff and inspect her fully. The dog leaned into her touch, a sign of tentative trust. Despite her kindness, Emily was cautious. She kept her movements slow, speaking in quiet tones. She didn't want to startle the animal or cause it pain. She thought about what to do next. Calling animal control? Taking the dog to a vet? But with no phone on her and time running short, those options felt distant. The dog's ribs were visible under the scraggly fur. Its eyes, glossy and watery, reflected exhaustion and pain. Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to help, but she didn't know how. Then, from the corner of her eye, she noticed movement, an older man with a dog leash walking a golden retriever. He glanced at the scene and shook his head, muttering, "People these days." Emily felt a flush of embarrassment. Maybe she was overstepping, maybe this wasn't her place. The man's judgmental look made her want to back away, to pretend she hadn't seen the dog at all. But the dog took another shivering step toward Emily and lowered its head, as if begging her silently not to leave. The wind gusted, blowing a swirl of dry leaves across the pavement. Emily pulled her jacket tighter around herself and the dog. She made a decision, small but significant. She slowly took off her scarf, the soft knit fabric warm against the cold air. Wrapping it carefully around the dog's thin body, she felt a flicker of hope ignite inside her chest. The dog's eyes seemed to brighten, a little spark of comfort in the freezing morning. Emily looked up once more before standing, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. She didn't know where this would lead or if she was making the right choice, but she knew one thing. She couldn't leave this dog out here alone. With a deep breath, she bent down again and gently scooped the dog into her arms. It was lighter than she expected, its body trembling against her chest. As Emily started walking away from the cold street, the dog nestled into the folds of her jacket, letting out a soft sigh. This wasn't just a stray animal anymore. It was a life that depended on her now, and Emily's reaction had just set a chain of events into motion that neither of them could have predicted. Emily felt the dog's fragile body press against her, its rapid heartbeat echoing in the quiet morning air. She glanced down at the trembling creature nestled in her arms and realized just how cold it still was despite her scarf's warmth. The shivers hadn't stopped, and the limp in its paw made her wince with sympathy. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. This wasn't something she had planned to do today, or ever. But as the dog's big, trusting eyes looked up at her, Emily's usual hesitation gave way to something else, a surge of fierce compassion. For a moment, she just stood there on the frosty sidewalk, holding the dog close. The street around them was still deserted. the distant hum of a car and the faint chirping of winter birds the only sounds. Emily's mind raced with questions. How long had this dog been out here? Was it hungry? Was it hurt badly? Did it have a family waiting somewhere? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it. The text was from a classmate asking if she was coming to school soon. Emily wanted to reply, no, but the words caught in her throat. She felt the weight of the decision settling on her. Turning away now would be easy, safe, and convenient, but it would mean leaving this creature alone in the cold. Emily's fingers grazed the dog's scruffy fur, feeling the rough patches and thin spots. The dog let out a soft whimper, and Emily's heart broke a little more. Then, the dog moved. Again, this time with more confidence, and gently licked her cheek. It was a small, tentative gesture, but for Emily it was everything. The dog was trusting her. She knew she couldn't just walk away. Her breath came out in short, visible puffs. Emily looked down the street, the school bus route stretching ahead, like a reminder of all the things she was supposed to be doing. But her eyes drifted back to the dog in her arms, so fragile, so desperate for help. The cold seeped through her jacket, but she barely noticed anymore. The world had shrunk to the space between her and this tiny, trembling life. She took another deep breath, steadying herself. "Okay," she whispered, almost to herself. "I'm going to help you." Emily scanned the dog's face, searching for any clues, a collar, a tag, something that would tell her who this poor animal belonged to. But there was nothing but the worn, muddy collar, broken in places. The thought hit her like a punch. This dog might be lost, or worse, abandoned. A sudden pang of anger and sadness surged inside her. How could anyone leave such a sweet creature out in the cold? What kind of person would turn their back on this? She swallowed hard, feeling tears prick at her eyes. Emily wasn't used to letting her emotions show, but in that moment, the helplessness and urgency overwhelmed her. Her mind quickly jumped to practical concerns. She didn't know much about animals, how to care for one, what to do if it was hurt, but she knew she couldn't leave the dog alone. Not now. The dog's breathing began to slow, its shivering less violent as it nestled closer to her. Emily carefully adjusted the scarf, wrapping it tighter around the animal's thin body. It gave a faint sigh, its eyes half closed. Suddenly, the faint sound of footsteps behind her startled her. Emily turned quickly, clutching the dog tighter. It was a woman jogging past, dressed in bright workout clothes, who glanced over and paused. "That dog looks awful," the woman said, concern flashing in her eyes. "Have you called animal control?" Emily shook her head, unsure. "No, I just found him. I don't know what to do," the woman frowned. "You should get help. That dog could be sick." Emily nodded, appreciating the advice, but feeling overwhelmed. "I don't have time to wait around, and I don't want him to go back outside." The woman gave a small, sympathetic smile. "Well, you're doing a good thing. Just be careful, okay?" Emily watched the jogger disappear down the street, then looked back at the dog, its eyes meeting hers, full of trust. Her resolve hardened. This wasn't about convenience or fear anymore. This was about doing the right thing, no matter what it cost her. She took one last look at the quiet street, then turned toward home. The day she had planned was gone. In its place was something uncertain and scary, but also powerful, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to stop walking and extend your hand to someone in need. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she held the dog closer, feeling its fragile body still shivering against her chest. The cold morning air nipped at her cheeks and ears, but she barely noticed. Her entire focus was on the small life in her arms, a life that had no one else to turn to. She glanced around the empty street, then down at the dog's injured paw, limp and swollen. A pang of worry tightened her chest. She had no idea how serious the injury was, and she didn't know the first thing about caring for a hurt animal. But the thought of leaving the dog outside in the freezing cold alone and suffering was unbearable. Emily's phone buzzed again in her pocket. This time she pulled it out and glanced at the screen. It was her mother, texting to check if she had left for school yet. Her throat tightened as she read the message. "Are you on your way? Don't be late." The pressure of expectations, the familiar tug of routine, tried to pull her back to the safe path she always took, but Emily's gaze drifted back to the dog's soft, pleading eyes. Her mother wouldn't understand why she was stopping, why she was about to risk so much for a stray animal. But for Emily, it didn't matter. She took a deep breath and sent a quick reply. "Something came up. Need to talk when I get home." The dog whimpered softly, nestling closer to her warmth. Emily shifted her scarf, tightening the wrap around the trembling creature. She could feel its shallow breaths against her skin, each one fragile and uneven. She looked at the path ahead, knowing that if she kept walking toward school, she'd be leaving the dog behind, vulnerable and alone. So, without hesitation, she turned around and began walking home, her steps slow but determined. The street felt colder somehow as she moved away from the familiar routine and toward the unknown. Emily wondered what her parents would say when she got home, whether they would scold her or worse, tell her to get rid of the dog. But in this moment, nothing else mattered except the small, shivering life she carried. As she walked, the dog's weight in her arms felt heavier than she expected, but it was a comforting weight, a reminder that she wasn't alone anymore. Emily's thoughts raced. She thought about calling a vet or an animal shelter, but what if they refused to help? What if they put the dog down? She didn't want to risk that. Her heart ached to help, but the uncertainty was terrifying. Halfway home, she stopped near a small park bench and sat down carefully, still holding the dog. The dog shifted slightly, nuzzling against her neck, and Emily could feel a faint pulse of gratitude radiating from its fragile body. The cold began to seep in again, and she wrapped her arms tighter around the dog. She tried to imagine a warm place for it, a bed by a fire, food waiting in a bowl, hands gently stroking its fur. She longed to make that vision real. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from her best friend, Sarah. "You're not coming to school?" "What's up?" Emily hesitated, then typed back, "Found a dog, hurt, taking it home." Within seconds, the reply came, "OMG, Emily! Are you serious? You're amazing. Need help." The word amazing struck her like a spark. Emily hadn't thought of herself that way before. She'd always been the quiet one, the one who faded into the background. But now, holding this trembling dog, she felt something new rising inside her. Courage. She stood up, clutching the dog gently. The street was quieter now, the city slowly waking up. The world felt bigger and more complicated than before. Emily took a deep breath and started walking again. Every step was a choice, a step away from safety and certainty, and a step toward a future unknown. But for the first time in a long time, Emily wasn't afraid. She was ready. Because sometimes the right choice isn't the easy one. It's the one that demands bravery, kindness, and heart. And Emily was about to discover just how far that choice would take her. Emily's breath formed small clouds in the chilly morning air as she hurried along the cracked sidewalk toward home. The dog, still wrapped snugly in her scarf, nestled quietly against her, its breathing more steady, but still fragile. The weight of the little life in her arms was a constant reminder of the choice she'd made, to turn away from routine and step into the unknown. Every step felt heavier than the last, not from the dog's weight, but from the reality settling into her mind. She was leaving behind her predictable day, school, classes, friends, to take responsibility for something unexpected and uncertain. It was scary, but strangely freeing. The streetlights flickered off as the city stirred awake, the distant hum of traffic growing louder. Emily's phone vibrated again in her pocket, but she didn't check it right away. Her thoughts were tangled in questions. What would her parents say? How would she explain this? What if the dog was sick or worse? She glanced down at the dog's closed eyes and soft, uneven breathing. The small creature was exhausted, but trusting, completely dependent on her now. Emily slowed her pace, passing the corner bakery where the smell of fresh bread filled the cold air. The familiar scene felt distant, like a life she was walking away from. She looked around, suddenly aware of how quiet the neighborhood had become, how empty the streets were at this hour. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from Sarah. "Anything I can do? I'm just a text away." Emily smiled faintly. grateful for the support. It was a small comfort, but she still felt alone in the weight of her decision. When she reached the worn front steps of her house, she paused. The door was locked, the windows closed tight against the cold. The warmth inside beckoned, but she hesitated, uncertain how to bring this unexpected visitor into her world. Taking a deep breath, Emily fumbled with her keys, then stepped inside. The familiar scent of cinnamon and pine greeted her, a stark contrast to the cold, lonely street outside. She set the dog gently on the floor and watched as it curled into a small ball, its body still trembling. The house felt quiet, almost too quiet. Emily knew her parents were still asleep, and that gave her a brief moment of peace. She wrapped a blanket around the dog and sat down beside it, her fingers tracing the soft fur despite its roughness. The dog stirred, lifting its head to look at her with tired, trusting eyes. Emily felt a surge of protectiveness wash over her. She promised herself she'd do everything she could to keep this fragile life safe. She grabbed her phone and started searching for the nearest veterinary clinic. Her fingers trembled as she dialed the number, explaining the situation in a hurried whisper. The receptionist assured her they could see the dog later that day and gave her instructions on how to keep it warm and comfortable in the meantime. Relief washed over Emily. She wasn't alone in this, after all. She called her mother next, her voice shaking as she explained what had happened. Her mother's initial surprise turned into concern, then into cautious support. "We'll figure this out together," she said softly. That simple phrase lifted a weight from Emily's shoulders. As the morning light grew stronger, Emily prepared a small bowl of lukewarm water and some scraps of toast for the dog. It lapped at the water eagerly, but sniffed the food hesitantly. Emily wasn't sure what the dog had eaten last or how hungry it truly was. While the dog rested, Emily sat by the window, watching the world outside come to life. Cars passed by, people hurried to work, children waited at bus stops. The ordinary morning was unfolding around her, but inside, everything had changed. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Sending you all the good vibes. You're doing something amazing." Emily smiled again, feeling a quiet pride she hadn't expected. This small act of kindness, a detour from her normal day, was beginning to ripple out in ways she hadn't imagined. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be vet visits, questions, maybe even tough decisions. But for now, she was content to sit quietly with the dog, their lives intertwined by an unexpected encounter on a cold, lonely morning. Emily reached down and gently stroked the dog's head. "We'll get through this together," she whispered, and, for the first time that day, the shivers inside her heart began to fade. The early afternoon sun filtered through the curtains of Emily's small living room, casting warm, golden patches of light across the floor. The dog, now resting comfortably on a soft blanket that Emily had laid out, seemed calmer than before. But beneath the quiet, Emily's mind buzzed with worry and questions. She knew the next few hours would be crucial. She gently lifted the dog into her arms, careful not to jostle its injured paw. It whimpered softly but didn't resist. Together they stepped out into the crisp spring air. Emily wrapped the scarf tighter around the dog and headed toward the car, her heart pounding with nerves and hope. The veterinary clinic was a short drive away, and Emily kept talking softly to the dog, trying to reassure both of them. "You're going to be okay. We'll get you fixed up soon," she whispered, her voice a soothing thread through the tense silence. Inside the clinic, the sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air. The receptionist greeted Emily with a warm smile that eased some of her anxiety. "We'll take good care of him," she said kindly, handing Emily a form to fill out. As she waited, Emily watched the dog carefully. Its eyes flickered with uncertainty, but also a fragile trust. She knew that the dog was in pain, but also grateful to be in a safe place. When the vet finally called her into the examination room, Emily followed, her hands shaking slightly. The veterinarian, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice, knelt beside the dog. She examined the injured paw carefully, feeling for tenderness and checking for broken bones. "It looks like a deep sprain, possibly from being caught in something sharp," the vet explained. "There's some swelling and a slight infection we'll need to treat, But with proper care he should recover fully. Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Relief washed over her like a wave. "We'll give him antibiotics and pain medication," the vet continued. "We'll also want to run some basic tests to make sure there aren't any other issues, but overall, he's in stable condition." Emily nodded, feeling grateful but overwhelmed. She asked about the cost, worried if she could afford the treatment. The vet smiled reassuringly. "We understand this can be unexpected. We'll work with you on payment plans or connect you with local charities that help animals in need." Tears pricked at Emily's eyes. She had expected to be turned away or judged for taking in a stray, but instead, she found kindness and support. The 2. Vet also scanned the dog for a microchip, but found none. "He's probably been on his own for some time," she said softly. Emily's heart sank a little at that thought. How long had this dog been wandering, abandoned and alone? The vet wrapped the paw carefully, explaining how to change the bandage and keep the dog comfortable. Emily listened closely, determined to do everything right. After the examination, Emily sat quietly with the dog in a recovery room, holding its paw gently. The medication started to take effect, and the dog's breathing slowed, its eyes growing heavy. Emily felt a mix of exhaustion and hope. This was only the beginning of the journey, but it was a step toward healing, for the dog and maybe for her too. Before leaving, the vet gave Emily a list of things to watch for and scheduled a follow-up appointment. "You're doing a wonderful thing," she said with a smile. "This little guy is lucky to have you." Driving home, Emily glanced over at the dog nestled beside her in the passenger seat. It looked peaceful, the shivers gone for now. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "How's your new friend doing?" Emily smiled, typing back, "Better now at the vet. Thanks for being there." Sarah replied quickly, "Always. You're amazing, Emily." The words warmed her more than the afternoon sun streaming through the car windows. Emily realized that helping this dog was changing her in ways she hadn't expected. It was teaching her about courage, kindness, and the power of small acts of love. As they pulled into the driveway, Emily looked forward to the days ahead, uncertain, challenging, but filled with hope. Together, they were beginning a new chapter. In the days following the vet visit, Emily's life took on a new rhythm, one filled with unexpected responsibility, gentle moments, and surprising joy. The dog, who she had started calling Toby after days of searching for a name that felt right, began to settle into the small sanctuary Emily created at home. Each morning, Emily woke early to check on Toby, carefully changing the bandage on his paw and giving him the prescribed medication. Toby's once shivering body now felt warmer, stronger, though still cautious. His eyes, full of gratitude and trust, seemed to follow Emily everywhere she went. At school, Emily felt the tug of two worlds. In the classroom, she was the quiet student, trying to concentrate while her thoughts drifted to Toby, waiting at home. During lunch, Sarah caught up with her, a concerned yet supportive smile on her face. "How's Toby doing?" Sarah asked, pulling Emily into a quiet corner away from the noisy cafeteria. Emily smiled softly. "Better, slowly healing, but it's a lot. I didn't realize how much work this would be." Sarah nodded. "I'm here if you need anything, or just someone to vent to." The friendship felt more real than ever, grounding Emily amid the chaos of new responsibilities. After school, Emily would rush home, eager to see Toby's progress. She noticed subtle changes. Toby would wag his tail when she entered the room, nudge her hand for pets, and sometimes even try to play with a worn tennis ball she had found in the backyard. Those moments of joy gave Emily a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt before. Yet alongside the happiness were the challenges. Toby's injury limited his movements, and he sometimes struggled to adjust to his new environment. On one afternoon, Emily found him whining near the door, restless and anxious. She knelt beside him, stroking his fur gently. "I know it's hard, Toby, but you're safe here," she whispered, feeling the weight of his confusion. One evening, Emily's parents sat down with her for a serious conversation. They were proud of her compassion, but worried about the time and money the dog required. Emily listened carefully, understanding their concerns, but also determined not to give up. "We'll find a way," she said firmly. "I can help with chores, save my allowance, whatever it takes." Her parents exchanged a glance and nodded slowly, recognizing her resolve. Meanwhile, Emily spent hours researching dog care, learning about nutrition, exercise, and rehabilitation for injured pets. She joined online forums, connected with local rescue groups, and even volunteered at a nearby animal shelter on weekends. Each step deepened her commitment and her understanding. The community around her began to notice the change too. Neighbors who had once glanced past her now stopped to ask about Toby and offer advice or supplies. One elderly woman brought a handmade blanket. A local store donated a small bag of dog food. Emily realized that by helping Toby, she was also weaving herself into a broader network of kindness. One chilly evening, as she sat beside Toby wrapped in a blanket, she marveled at how much had changed in just a few weeks. The dog that had once shivered on a cold sidewalk was now a living symbol of hope and resilience. Toby looked up at her, eyes shining with trust, and Emily smiled. Together, they had overcome the hardest part, the fear of the unknown. Now their journey was just beginning. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window as Emily prepared a bowl of breakfast, not just for herself, but for Toby too. The dog's tail thumped eagerly against the floor as he waited patiently, a far cry from the shivering creature she had found weeks ago. Toby's paw was healing well, the swelling gone and the fur slowly growing back. But more importantly, the light in his eyes had changed, bright, curious, and full of life. Emily watched him eat, a smile spreading across her face. This moment, simple and ordinary, was a triumph, a reminder of how far they had both come. The girl who had been hesitant and unsure now moved with quiet confidence. The dog who had been lost and scared now trusted and loved. It hadn't been easy. There had been late nights filled with worry, vet visits that drained her savings, and moments when doubt crept in like a shadow. But Emily never gave up, and Toby's recovery was proof of that determination. School had become different too. Emily's classmates, once oblivious to her, now saw her in a new light. She was no longer just the quiet girl. She was the one who had saved Toby, who had shown courage and kindness beyond what many expected. Sarah stayed by her side through it all, a constant friend and cheerleader. "You did something incredible," she told Emily one afternoon as they walked home from school. "You didn't just save a dog, you changed a life, and maybe even your own." Emily nodded, feeling the truth in those words. This journey had taught her more about herself than she ever imagined possible. She'd discovered strength she didn't know she had, and a deep compassion that shaped her every decision. The community around Emily had also changed. Neighbors stopped to ask about Toby, sharing stories of their own pets or offering help. Emily felt connected in a way she never had before, part of a web of kindness that stretched beyond her small world. One afternoon, as Emily sat with Toby in the backyard, her mother joined her. She smiled warmly, reaching out to stroke Toby's fur. "You've done something wonderful here," she said softly. "I'm proud of you." Emily looked up, her heart full. "Thank you, Mom. It's been hard, but worth it." The dog wagged his tail, sensing the happiness in the moment. As weeks turned to months, Toby grew stronger. His playful spirit returned, chasing after balls in the park and greeting neighbors with joyful barks. Emily continued to care for him, balancing school and responsibility with a newfound purpose. She also knew that this was just the beginning. There were many dogs like Toby out there, lost, scared, waiting for someone to help. Emily dreamed of doing more, of making a difference on a bigger scale. One evening, as she tucked Toby into his cozy bed, Emily whispered, "We're just getting started, Toby. There's a whole world out there, and we're going to help it." The dog looked up at her, eyes shining with trust and love, and in that moment Emily understood something profound. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness, like stopping on a cold morning to help a shivering dog, can change everything. It can awaken courage, build community, and create a new beginning. For Emily and Toby, the future was full of promise, hope, and endless possibilities. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next.